Hello, and welcome back to the What Problem Are You Solving podcast, the greatest innovation podcast you've seen today. We have the usual crew and special guest, Dan Ariely. We'll get to his introduction in a minute. But the beginning question always applies. Adam, what problem are you solving this week?
Making me go first. All right. There's no school today, so the big day with Dan, and of course the kids are home. It's my son's 9th birthday, so there's a whole party down. So you shut your door in the green room. I got to make sure all my doors are shut and no kids running around. And all right, since we got a lot of time to fill, I'll give one of my oldies but goodies. Submit one real customer interview, one customer insight, the ground truth. We're going back. I need interviews. I need 30 interviews, first time interviews, not what you said you were going to learn. So we're doing a hackathon for Valentine's Day, a Learn AI-thon. Get it? Learn A-thon instead of a hack-a-thon. But to come, you don't have to pay. You got to submit a customer interview because we're tired of hearing what you thought you heard, which I think plays into the rest of the hour. Tired of hearing what you thought you heard from your customers. We want to hear it directly from the customers. And so, all right, got a lot to do today.
Nice. Ty, what problem are you solving this week?
Well, gentlemen, I thought I was close to getting a gig, but the world is going upside down a little bit. So I'm actually on my way to Memphis to do a design thinking class with a bunch of folks who are in the community. And I think I have a good product. So we'll see. I've been working on it all week. I think the other part is trying to figure out how to build out my own consulting practice that's beyond the consulting practice that I kind of do for free, which I can't afford to do for free anymore. So I'm working on that problem, solving that problem. It is what it is.
That's an important problem to solve.
Yep. Yeah, trust me.
As for me, busy weekend with Super Bowl and my birthdays at the same time. So you can celebrate my birthday by watching the Eagles lose. Right, Ty?
Agles, Eagle. Come on, man. It's just going to be, nope. Fly, Eagles, fly. Sorry about that.
You know, I can mute you at any time. All right. Now, let's head over to special guest, Dan Ariely. Give us a brief introduction of what you'd like to say about yourself, your short bio, and what problem are you solving this week, Dan?
Short bio. My name is Dan Ariely. I am a professor at Duke University. I study basically behavioral change. I study what people think will change their behavior and actually what actually changes behavior. It turns out those are not the same thing. If it's okay, I'll say two problems that I'm trying to deal with this week. The first one is personal. I was very, very badly injured many years ago, and that's why I have lots of scars. That's why this side of my face is burned. There's no hair, I've been having more pain recently, and I'm trying to figure out strategies for dealing with pain. I have some, but I need some extra emphasis on this this week. So that's this period. I'm not sure this week, but this period. And then I'm at the university this week. I'm at Duke, and we are a very, very bureaucratic organization. And I've been trying to fight bureaucracy for a while. I have admitted failure. So now I complain about bureaucracy, but
you're in good company. Yes.
In good company, but I'm trying to figure out how can I deal with the bureaucracy. So I gave up on fixing anything on the bureaucracy side. I'm just trying to figure out my kind of what comfort level I'm at. On one hand, bureaucracy gets us to do nothing, right? The bureaucrats are happiest when we do nothing. I'm not comfortable doing absolutely nothing. So I'm trying to figure out within the bureaucracy, what can I do that it's a kind of compromise between my desire to do research and write and so on, but at the same time, realize I'm within a system that was certainly not designed by a benevolent.
No, I think that's a great kickoff starter question, because Again, we all had a reaction when you said, fighting the bureaucracy. We've lived, breathed that for many, many years. Most of us have been in even the government space as well. So, it's very true when you say that the purpose of a bureaucracy is to not change, right? It's to stabilize, formalize. And when you have innovators trying new ideas, that's literally what they exist to do. It's very hard to change the behavior of the corporate culture, right?
I'll give you a very sad example. So a few years ago, I wrote a little paper on suicide by physicians. So lots of physicians commit suicide, and when you try to understand why, these are people who joined the profession to help people. And you say, go ahead and help people. You finish studying, you studied for a long time, you're very intelligent, go ahead and help people. And then you put them in a system that says, but you can't prescribe this medication. And if you want to prescribe this one, you have to ask for permission. It will take you maybe 3 hours. And if you have 12 minutes per patient, and if you want 15, we'll reprimand you and so on. So it's a system where you take some of the most talented people we have with the most desire to help others, and then you try to micromanage them in ways that we can't, and
handcuff them, right?
Mm-hmm. and they commit suicide. And it's this frustration. Like, imagine that I told you, please help your customers, patients, but you can always only help them in the way that I think is helpful, and you have no judgment in it. And it's not the only reason, but it's a very, very frustrating profession. But it's a signal to the way we treat professionals. We treat them all the same. You're replaceable. Just do what you're told. No, we should. Of course, committing suicide is an extreme reaction, but decreased motivation is just so common. And if I may give another kind of very sad analogy. During COVID, there was a dramatic increase in domestic violence, about 900%. And I studied that domestic violence with a desire to try and reduce domestic violence. And one of the really sad things I learned is that when kids experience domestic violence, it's not the physical aspect of it. It's the fact that it's the person they depend the most on is now violent to them. Like, if you say, okay, it's the same violence, but get it from another kid, not such a big issue. It's the fact that it's who do you depend on? It's the person you depend on the most. Now, think about this. When you have an enemy, whatever, think about enemy in football, think about Hamas, think about, whatever enemy you have. When you have an enemy, you say, okay, I understand this enemy hates me. I understand it's a competition. But when you have bureaucracy within your organization, it's kind of like the kids with the domestic violence. Here are the people I depend on the most. These are the
enemy from within. Yeah.
How does that work? So it's much more. It's not just the inability. It's to say, like, explain to me the world. I came here, and think about the doctors. They say, we're here to heal. Everybody's saying we're here to heal. And now you're telling me not to do it. Like, we're here to do research. And now you within the organization are telling me not to do it. So it's a different when the bureaucracy is coming from above, like state rules, then your own organization is fighting you for things that are very, very strange.
I have a colleague who wrote a paper called Primary Risk. And in my world, where I got my training in graduate school, we talk about primary task, that every organization is specifically designed to execute against something. But at some point, you get to a fork in the road, right? And you're like, do I do this? So let's say you are a anti-smoking campaign. I think he uses that as an example. I need money. I need money to support my work. But if I support the work that the people who are going to give me the money, say tobacco companies, to support my work, if I find that something that's adverse to the work that I have been offered to do, what do? I get caught in this primary risk. And so what happens at the unconscious levels, people start to act. They start to act out. There's, in the psychology, they call it the reaction formation. As a result of, there is a formation of behaviors, there's a formation of acting out. There's all of these dynamics that go on that, to your point, are irrational. They are, I think that they are irrational at the outset, but they're rational to the human because it's the only way that I can kind of metabolize all of this experience. I don't know what else to do. And so to your point about the physician, I have gotten to the primary task, fork in the road. Do I follow my job and eat, or do I do the Hippocratic thing and do no harm and work for the patient? And meanwhile, there is a larger system that that keeps pounding away, and I get trapped. And so I feel lost, and that's a hell of a problem to deal with.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Lots of things to talk about. I don't know if you want to go in this direction. I'll just say I have now a website dedicated to my complaining about bureaucracy, and I find that it's a great outlet. It's a great outlet. So it's called the Center for Advanced Bureaucracy, and I post my complaints on bureaucracy. But yeah, I mean, we can spend hours on that if you want to.
Well, I'll actually pull on that. So, we all look up to you as this superhero of research and experimentation. So are you human like the rest of us? Is it just a place to vent, or is it based on stuff? Like, is there what actually was the shift from trying to fight it to understanding that you're like, did you maximize a curve somewhere? You're like, all right, I'm done fighting. Like the area under the curve is no longer worth the, or is it just like the rest of us? And even though we talk about human-centered design and double blind studies where you just like, I'm tired of this SHIT and
So first of all, for me, venting is not just venting. It's an opportunity to think more clearly, right? So I don't open a camera and vent. I basically try to systematically think about the system. And, eventually, bureaucracy is a system that we have created, maybe initially for good reasons, but then it got a life of its own, and I use it as an opportunity to think about why we got this way. So if you think about everything that we're trying to do and everything that I try to do, is we're trying to analyze human behavior, and then we're trying to figure out what we can do to make things better. So all the way from sign up flow for a website, where you say, let me understand what's really driving people and what we can do better, all the way to helping people make better decisions. We analyze first, right? Trying to understand what's going on wrong, what doesn't fit the human system, and then what solutions we can come up with.
Yeah, I think that brings up that's a good point. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, the cover art for this episode was the 3 sizes of popcorn, right? The choice architecture, where you can influence people's behavior to feel like they're making a choice, even though you're deliberately placing the pricing such that it forces them to nudges them in a one direction to buy something. And so when we help people build things quickly, and we're helping innovators, we're helping people decide how to let's just say price products in the market. Knowing that could be a dangerous thing, right? It can be manipulative if you're doing it maliciously. And so that's the fascinating part for me for behavioral economics is that once you know it, you could use it for good or evil, right? Yeah. So how can you implement something, say choice architecture, in a way that's not being manipulative? And I have some thoughts on that too, but I want to hear kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just comment about this idea. So we see things in the market like 3 sizes of popcorn. And then there's a layer above it, which you say, what am I really seeing from a social science perspective? Right? You're saying, okay, I'm seeing 3 sizes of popcorn, but then you can say another level of saying, what am I really seeing? And in most movie theaters, you're seeing 2 things. You're seeing 3 sizes, which basically makes the middle feels like a big compromise, a good compromise. But you're also seeing very unusual sizes. And these very unusual sizes confuses your sense of what's a fair price to pay. Because you see this this incredible time. Like, what's a reasonable price? I don't know, but whatever they say must be reasonable. So it has a couple of things, and it's important to keep this layer of saying, what am I really seeing? What are the principles at play here? And then you're trying to interpret them. And we have this advantage, I think. If you think about the world of design, which I really love, the world of design has not been able to come up with a language. Like, you can say, okay, this is a big button, this is a small button, this is red, this is this. The designers have like a sense of beauty or aesthetic in their mind or something, but they don't have a way to put a language on it. And because of that, it's very hard to figure out what exactly works and what doesn't, and what we should do later. So if you say, okay, here's an area, we have relative pricing, it looks like people are very sensitive to relative pricing, we could do more of that. Or this is a place where we could create an anchor for what's a reasonable price, we can do more of it. So we have this advantage of language. Maybe we have too much of it, but now in terms of your question, I talk a lot with my students about it, because it's a tough thing, because when is the boundary for ethics? So let's take something like wine. Wine is a very complex experience, and some very clever people created a language around wine. Tannin, complexity, acidity. They told us we need to drink wine from a special glass. They told us we need to lift it up and do like this and smell it and do all kinds of things. Now, with all of these things, we're actually changing the experience of wine. Now, do we change it from our taste buds? No. Do we change it from our minds? Absolutely. If you sit in a dinner and you drink a glass of, you drink some wine from a mug, your taste buds will not know the difference. But of course, you will think differently. You would pause differently. You would pay less attention. You might drink wine without even paying attention to the fact that you've been drinking. But when you do this and you look at the light and you smell and all of these things, you've changed the experience. So now let's call it placebo. And I love placebos, and placebos are real, and we can talk more about it. So you have a wine experience with placebo, and you have a wine experience without placebo. This one you can charge $100 per bottle. This one you can charge $20. Is it fake or is it real? Some and some.
Yes, exactly.
At least some of it is real. Like, imagine another example. You go to a hotel. I just went to some hotel. And it turns out that they have this unbelievable wall with greenery on it. And I was just curious, and I asked them about it. And they gave me the whole story about the greenery and how complex it is and what goes on in it and so on. After that, I sat next to this green wall and I had my coffee and I really enjoyed. But before that, it was just a wall of greenery. Knowing about it, knowing about the complexity, knowing about the deal, I would love to go back and sit next to that wall of green and have my coffee.
Yes, and that's what I think. I'm glad you went there, because there was a mental hump that I had to get over as an innovator, where it's like, how can I charge people for something that I know I'm helping them out with? And it's the fact that you are creating value for them. Like, it was ethical to charge the customer, because you know that you are giving more value than you're getting back, and that you can play the whole economics game. But at the same time, I love the way you phrase that. It's now you're enhancing the experience, right? That if you're not doing it in a manipulative way, you can still do this choice architecture or the anchoring, like you said, to actually help people get more value out of your goods and services. So thank you for that.
So the green wall is an example of the wine, and clearly we're able to create more value. How much value are we able to create more, and how much to charge for it? I don't have a good answer, but that's one thing. But basically, try to figure out whether you're creating more value. So that's one type of issue that I don't have a good standard. There are other things where we do have better standards. So let's think about something like end of life. At the end of life, people have to choose whether they want, and I'm taking something extreme on purpose, right? But end of life, people have to choose whether they want to die at home or they want to die at hospital. And of course, the system right now is designed to get people to die in hospital. People get hospitalized. Once you get people to, like, something happens, like somebody is, let's say, cancer, stage 4, difficult situation, something happened, the family calls an ambulance, they get hospitalized. Once they get hospitalized, the procedure, they start doing lots of things. Now, the family member needs to decide to take them home. Very, very tough. Are they ready for it, and so on? Now, the person maybe said that they want to die at home, but the family member are not set for this, and lots of effort needs to be done because the system is designed. You call an ambulance, they get hospitalized. The process goes this way. Instead, if you basically got people from the beginning not to call the ambulance, everything would have been fine. The person, let's say,
it's kind of like the defaults, right? And how if the default choices in the beginning can alter the path of care. Interesting.
That's right. So how do we convince ourselves? Like, we need to design a system that we either let the hospital controls or we let the patient and the family controls. Right now, the health system has the incentive to do all kinds of things, and I don't think anybody there is evil. They're just so gang-ho on prolonging people's lives by without questions about cost and quality of life that's what they do. But let's say we are a healthcare provider. Let's say we are in health insurance. We have to decide,
right,
how do we help people do that? And we have to convince ourselves that when 80% of Americans say that they want to die at home, that they actually want to die at home. So here's how we're going about it. First thing we do, we ask people, what do you want to do? And we don't ask people in their 20s because they don't know.
Yeah, right.
We ask people who are very sick. And then we did another project in which we asked relatives of people who died recently. And we said, if your father or mother, if you can consult them, what would they have said were their biggest mistakes in how they managed the last stage? And most people say about that. So once we convince ourselves that dying in hospital is not good for most people, and most people would have preferred, by the way, in the US, the numbers are about 80-20. 80 prefer to die at home, about 20% die at home. So big gap. Once we convince ourselves that that's what most people would want to do, people in the right condition, that their family members said that that's what they would have wanted to do, now I feel comfortable trying to design a system that would help people accomplish this. Now, would we create a system maybe that is too forceful and maybe 80% want to die at home, but we would get 85%? Possible. It's very hard.
Oh, yeah.
But I judge the mistakes on both sides. I say, without this system, most people would not do the right thing. With the system, it will be a smaller amount. So I also accept the fact that no matter what system we have, choice architecture as it is, it will drive people in some way that some people would not get the ideal. I mean, I'm sorry about this. I wish I could do it better. But I'm trying to say, to start with, on average, is a system that I'm replacing much better than the one.
Which is the least worst option. Yeah.
That's right. As a starting point. And then we can go ahead and try to improve it.
Dan, it reminds me of what you're talking about. Reminds me of the work of Clay Christensen and others. One of the gentlemen we had actually previously about the job to be done. And the job to be done, he articulates it as a functional, social, emotional. We know, sadly, the job to be done of a person who's sick is eventually to die, but there's a social and emotional component of the architecture, as in the hospital, the hospice, the nurses, the doctors, the families that surround them, that I think that what you're speaking to, that we also need to consider around the social and emotional pieces of components of that, because ultimately that's the equation. Those three pieces equal sign value, and how the customer takes it up. And so I appreciate you articulating it like that for this conversation and for the audience. I think that's a very powerful way for us to appreciate that it's not just a financial, or not a financial, it's a functional thing to do. That probably more importantly, the work that the three of us have been doing for a long time, it's if you don't consider the social job to be done and the emotional job to be done of the consumer of whatever you're doing, you've probably missed out on 80, to your point, 80-20, 80% of the value that you can actually bring to somebody.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. So I recently finished discussions with 100 end-of-life doulas. Do you know this profession?
Right.
So there are doulas that help bring life to the world, and there are doulas that spend some time at the end of life trying to help the patient and their family. So I talked to about 100 of those and try to understand what do they think is a good end of life. And there are basically four things. No pain, doable with medical technology. No loss of dignity in the body, tough, but we can make some progress. Surrounded by love, just social. And having a sense of legacy, that they've left something behind, right? Incredibly. And if you think about that, you basically say, well, end of life is a medical issue, but it's not just a medical issue. In fact, most of it is about something very different. These discussions with the end of life doulas were so inspiring for me that I actually went and did the course myself. So now I'm a trained
nice
end of life doula myself. But it's if we think about it as a case, an extreme case, but for a customer journey, but it's a case that tells you something about how important it is to consider all the aspects, right? We usually think about things in silos, like here's your health, here's your finance, here's this, but really there's a way. Not all problems are like it, but a lot of problems are much more general, and it would be at least a good thing to do to acknowledge the other elements in it. For example, finances. Are they just about finances? Are they also about relationship? How many people fight in
over
couples
money?
About money? What happens to education of the kids? What happened to self-control? What's the role of loneliness in money? We know, for example, or stress and financial spending. So I think kind of expanding the perspective, at least recognizing it, even if we're not going to do everything about it, just kind of sketching it out is very useful.
You talked earlier about bureaucracy and trying to, balance or navigate the system or find some way to work about that. I know Adam had a question about the corporatism and how that balances out. Adam, what was the spirit of your question there?
Well, the first thing you said in the beginning was you want to make things better. You personally, just from your website and from what I know about you, I don't know if you said, I think you said to make things better, to make people happier. And it's not a gotcha question, but you're saying the bureaucrats like to do nothing. So, and Ty was talking about, are bureaucracies designed to do nothing, or are they designed to withstand change? I think in the corporate world, they're intentionally designed to withstand change. And, there's all this talk now, there's no broken systems, that all the systems do what they're intended to do. They're, like you said before, it's not malevolent.
So let me clarify. What I said was that the bureaucrats want the rest of us to do nothing. So the bureaucrats want their organization to get bigger and bigger, but their incentive is for the rest of us to pose more risk. And you can also understand them, right? You could say,
sure.
Think about the hierarchy in companies. Who are at the lowest rank in terms of the hierarchy? It's usually compliance, right? Because when things are good, everybody hates them. When things are bad, people complain about them. So what do people in compliance want? They want, I want nobody to call me upset. That's what they want. They want nobody to blame them. So they basically create a system. Now, if you think about, the very sad events of how the university was reacted to October 7th. Is a metaphor, right? We had all these presidents of universities standing inside of Congress and saying it depends, right? You basically have people who are getting huge benefits from taxpayers' money, who are getting like universities are very special institutions that we're getting things from society, and we owe things to society, and we owe progress and thought leadership. I mean, the U.S. government, in this case, with taxes, are funding us and subsidizing us, not because we have nice grass and it's beautiful to walk. We're supposed to provide some function of education, thought leadership, direction.
You have a green wall. That's what we like. We like
Yes.
the green wall. We'll keep paying for that.
Yeah, and what you want is that when something like horrific like October 7 happened, you want universities, let's say Harvard is an example, to say we have some of the smartest kids in the world, we have some of the smartest faculty in the world, we have Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims. Let's take 3 weeks, a month, and let's come up with our plan for how to solve this terrible problem. And maybe it will not be the ideal plan, but it will be something. It will, or you can say, let's ignore the problem and let people fight. and 3,000 away from Gaza, let people fight so much that they demonstrate how we can't work together. It's crazy. But when you think about the bureaucrats, what do they want? They said, I don't want to be on any page. I don't want to make any mistake. I don't want to dare to do anything.
Right.
I don't want to take a step that might go wrong. This is what you're saying, right? It's anti-progress. If there was a clear solution to the issues between Israel and the Palestinians, maybe they would offer it. But if it's risky, they say, I don't want the risk. I don't want to be in the New York Times. I don't want to be called for Congress. I don't want to do anything. Let me try and do nothing. And that's a problem that we have. And if you ask the question of where is progress coming from to society? I think as bureaucracy is increasing at universities, and as bureaucracy is increasing in large companies, less and less of the progress is coming from there, and more progress is coming from small, flexible organizations. And it's really kind of something that it's killing the organization, right? So it's actually a very, very sad outcome. Now, some of it is very unfortunate. For example, I'll tell you a story. So we worked with the Federal Credit Union in an Indian reservation to try and help very, very poor people to save a little bit of money, right? And Indian reservations are complex places. They're usually far away from cities, very hard to get employment. More than 90% of the people are unemployed. And these are not their land and they can't get them. So it's very hard to get a mortgage. So if you want to build something, it's very, very tough. And we wanted to help them. So we did a 3-year study. And we tried to get things going. Anyway, we finished the study. And they send us the results. And they send us the result, and we see that they did not hide the identity of everybody. They did not send us Social Security number. They did not send us last name, but they did send the first names. Mistake. We immediately deleted it. We immediately notified them and notified our legal department.
Mm-hmm.
But all hell broke loose. We will never work with them. They need to get insurance. So, we created these rules for privacy, some for good reasons. But now universities are so afraid of violating these rules that they're not allowing us to do research.
Wow.
In many ways. So, and you can understand them, right? One of the Duke lawyers says, I have a big endowment on my back. I'm not letting you risk it. My answer was, give up your endowment, have less money.
Then we can go, right?
Then we can take more risk. But if you think about it, like a university with a very large endowment is basically not going to take any risk. University with small endowment might say we are willing to take risk and we are more connected to our mission. So I don't have a good answer for this, but we got into some situations where the fear of taking risks is just way, way too high for a bureaucratic organization. They're not willing to take it, and without risk, where will progress come from?
Well
It's
said.
interesting. I was taking some notes. I'm sorry. I just wanted real quick that this idea of complexity, and because I think that's what you're speaking to. You're speaking to the complexity of the human condition. Like we make these very complex structures to feel safe and secure. And I'm wondering, and I think you've already answered the question, because my thought was, so how does this whole idea of irrationality, behavior, architecture, all this stuff help recenter the human? Because right now the architecture, the institutions at the center, not the human is at the center. And I think that that is a huge problem. I know Gary Hamel's work on humanocracy about placing the human back in the center, or your colleague, the Heath brothers, your colleagues, like how do we put the human at the center of the value chain? So we are building out for humanity, right? Versus replication of systems that heretofore are cool, fine, awesome, except that they become more central to the value chain than the human being. It's just my thought. I appreciate what you're saying.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I'm just writing something to think about for later. You're absolutely right. And I'll tell you, I'll give you kind of my thought about this. I think it's about data. So think about all the systems that are about human-centered. What do we think is the best one? I think that one of the best ones is cars. And if you think about cars, if you think about the development of cars have gotten better every year by recognizing what lousy drivers we are and trying to redesign the cars, right? They don't send us to a driver ed. They said, you know what? You drive too fast, we'll give you a seatbelt. You don't slow fast enough, we'll give you anti-lock brake. You don't look back, we'll make side mirrors and rear view mirrors and little indicators, and you don't pay attention, and we'll do all kinds of other things. And if you think about the flawed human, cars are basically designed to take each one of our flaws and try to build around them. One day, more and more with sensors and so on. But the system is not assuming perfect human beings and saying, let's just design cars for perfect people. Right? They would look very differently. It says, no, we have these very flawed people, and let's fix it. Now, are we better drivers or better information consumers? Probably we're better drivers than information consumer, but the information systems we have are not assuming our flaws, and they're not building around our flaws. They are designed to take advantage.
Yeah, confirmation bias, exactly.
Confirmation bias, negativity bias, we like gossip, all these things. So I think what's happening with cars, and the reason cars are such a good example for figuring out mistakes and trying to fix them, is we see the mistakes. We see the mistakes. There are car accidents, there are deaths. We see the mistakes, it's unavoidable. And because we see the mistakes, we fix it. In other things, the mistakes are not as apparent. Think about how the computer is designed and how much it wastes your time. Think about the design of the calendar. I think the calendar is a terrible system. It's designed, it's encouraging people to have more meetings, right? If you say, what is the calendar designed?
Please tell my boss. Thank you.
It's designed to coordinate things that happen at the same time. It's not designed to be your to-do list. It's not designed to help you with your priorities. It's not designed to help you figure out, are you productive now or not productive now, and help you. No, it's designed for meetings. Meetings should be a tiny part of what our agenda should be about, right? If you think about what are all the important things you should do in the next month, my guess is most of them are not in your calendar.
Yeah, that's good.
And if you open the calendar in the morning and follow what this, I have something. And then if somebody asks you for a favor, you don't even remember all the things you're supposed to be doing. You say, I have a free hour in my calendar. Let me join this meeting. So the calendar is a system that gets people to have too many meetings and not enough time for for different things. Now we don't see the mistakes. We don't have a good way to track time and productivity and stress and so on. Like with cars, the measurements are quite clear, right? We see little accidents and big accidents and horrific accidents, and we understand what went wrong. There's no agency that is responsible for the carnage of calendars, right? And like imagine that every time there was,
We need a department of calendar efficiency.
That's right.
That's what we need.
Think about airplanes. Every time there's an airplane crash, there's a committee that studies it in great details and make recommendations. The calendars are creating small damages every day. They're just slowly killing our productivity and taking our time and getting us to be in too many meetings and so on. But we're not measuring it. We're not designing for that. So if you ask me, I know, Kai, this is a long answer, but if you ask me how come the person is not in the middle, I think we're not measuring the right things. And if we started by measuring the right thing, then we might start designing for that.
Oh, a big fan of that, right? Because we get too focused on outputs rather than outcomes. So when I teach innovation, that's exactly what I overemphasize to say, like, hey, you can get so busy in just doing things that you're not actually focusing on the results, right? And I love the way you phrase that. If we actually just stop for a minute and thought about what is the outcome, what's the result we want, then we can actually shift the outputs, the behaviors, the inputs, the outputs, the activity itself.
That's right. There's a phrase called structured procrastination. And it's basically when you get the feeling that you're doing something, but like, oh, I answered 10 more emails, or I wrote a to-do list, and the first item was write a to-do list, and we get to cross things out, and we get a lot of satisfaction from it, but really not making much progress.
So Dan, I have a question for you about the balance between complexity and structure, and it's based on some of the things that you just said. And I love this idea that the calendar is actually destroying our capacity to do that. John and I used to work with a guy. He was an older gentleman, had worked for some, Fortune top 5 consulting firm. And he used to just literally walk up and down the hallways. And he went into one of these senior leaders' office and said, let me take a look at your calendar. And it was all colored. And he's like, how do you get anything done? Yeah. Right? How do you get anything done? And so I'm wondering if the balance is the space to get stuff done and be creative and be productive. And so if I am leaving space for creativity, right, that it allows me to find it and to think about the things that will drive me to be more productive and more engaged and be a better learner and, be a better leader, versus I go from meeting to meeting to meeting and I'm preparing the next 5 minutes to either go to the bathroom or maybe go to the bathroom, maybe to eat, and then prepare for the next meeting, which I have no idea what I'm talking about anyway, because my administrative aide said, here, ask these 3 questions. And that's all I'm doing. I think that's fascinating. And I'm sure there's some, I won't say magical, but that's the only word that comes to mind. Some magical balance between being able to manage the complexity, to have the structure, and to be creative. There's some algorithm there.
There's I just got done rereading Deep Work by Cal Newport, and it talks a lot about that. The structured, procrastination, as well as having the time and space to think, right? Yeah. And the balance between the two. But to your point, Dan, you have to design your system around that, right? Because otherwise you just fall into the habits, which is another behavioral economics thing, right? We get so used to being comfortable in our habits that, well, this is the way. Right. I started a new job 2 years ago, and like everyone just works out of their email box, and so that's what you do.
And once you start thinking about choice architecture, you say, oh my goodness, meetings are an hour. Like, why not 40 minutes?
But yeah, exactly. Well, because they're always an hour. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
That 24 hours in the day. What if there were 30? Like, why? Like, all of this is arbitrary numbers, but once they're there, we get sucked into it. Look, there's the big thought is let's redesign the calendar. That's like the real big thought. Let's think about time. Let's think about time as a resource. Let's think about time as a resource we don't understand. Let's think about the problem of important versus urgent. Let's help people say no. So they, you invite somebody to, and they feel comfortable saying, I have these other things to do. Then you can say, let's think about the social structure, not the big calendar concept of time. Let's think within our company. How do we make meetings lower? How do we say, shorter meetings? How do we create new standards? And then we have things on a personal level.
Right.
So I'll tell you what I do is my most productive hours are in the morning. So my regular structure is I come to the office, my computer is off, I turn it on, I go to make an espresso. I come back in, nothing is open. Nothing is open on the computer. There's no news, there's no social media, there's nothing. And by the time I make my espresso, I think about what is the one thing that I most want to work on today. And I start by working on that for maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before I do anything else. And I'm not polluted with WhatsApp and emails and requests and so on. I just work on that. It's kind of a holy time. And it's also in my productive time, right? We each have slightly different productive time. And if you have a productive hour, it's like 3 regular hours, right? So use that wisely and don't use it to read news. And at least by the end of the day, I get to say, okay, I figure out what is the thing that is most important to me, and I got to dedicate some time to it. Maybe not all the time I would have wanted, but at least some of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did that, because I call myself a recovering engineer because I got so caught into building things that nobody wanted, and I'm a big fan of systems. And so if you deliberately design your system to take advantage of those types of things about peak productivity and doing all that. That's why I'm a big fan of Agile, because we artificially time box into 2-week sprints, and we're only going to focus for 2 weeks, and you're going to deliver something of value in 2 weeks instead of just giving them an arbitrary, or no deadline at all. So I think that's fascinating, just to be able to, even if you give yourself an artificial deadline, we tend to meet it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Speaking of artificial deadlines, do you have 10 more minutes, or do we get you for 10 extra?
Sadly, I have another meeting, so we only have 10 meetings. Here's the calendar.
Yeah.
You failed.
All right. So I'll do a couple rapid succession. You can choose your own adventure. On the university/corporate side, you were talking about small organizations is the solution to that, and is it irrational for those bigger organizations, especially corporate, that know they can just buy or absorb those innovations in the long run anyway, so they get their cake and eat it too? I don't know how that applies to the university setting. I agree, but corporates have found a way to both reduce their risk. No one ever got fired for hiring IBM, but then also take advantage of the innovations that are happening in these smaller agile systems. Yeah. So maybe the system has sort of figured it out. I'll ask 3 questions and then you can pick, and then I'll shut up. What was the other one? Well, one of them was about, you were saying cars are sort of, it almost sounds like you're saying they're anti-fragile. So if what's Talib, if you want to bring him, if you're friends with him, you want to bring him back on the show. Ty likes it when we fish for new guests. And then the sort of cliche question, what's the most predictably irrational? All your stories, like when you unpack them, a lot of them are like, oh, I can see how that person, it sort of makes sense when you unpack it, and they're still fascinating, but also curious what actually remains like the single most surprising, the most predictably irrational. And then, we deal with, John just said, recovering engineer, building things that nobody wants. We work with a lot of startups and a lot of corporate innovation labs who they believe their customer has a problem worth solving. The founder or the company wants to solve it, but the person doesn't. And I know you're working in, like fintech and ed tech and health tech. A lot of times people have really good ideas that should work, but they don't listen to the customer. There's no demand side sales. So there's an hour's worth.
Lots of things. Yeah. So first of all, I would say that it is amazing. Nobody would start a startup in biology without real biologists, but people do a lot of startup on behavioral change without somebody who understands behavioral change. And it's true that there's a lot of things in the library, and if somebody wants to go and read, they don't have to hire anybody, they can go and read, but it's true for biology as well. But it is amazing how everybody has an intuition about themselves, only that those intuitions don't work. But in terms of irrational behaviors, maybe I'll say two. The first one is our go-to approach in terms of convincing people. So think about the last 3 years. How many people you had a discussion with them when they were trying to convince them about something political, for example? And you talked, and they talked, and you talked, and then talked, and at the end of these discussions, all the discussion you had in the last 3 years, how many of them ended by the other person saying, you know what, you're absolutely right.
Zero.
I never thought about it before. Your arguments are so good. Basically very close to zero. And we also have never said those words to anybody else. And nevertheless, we keep on going to this approach. When you try to argue with people, it's still the fighting, even though our record for success is so low. It just feels, these people don't understand global warming. These people don't understand this. Let me argue. Okay, that's right. But maybe I'll end with something more positive. We're getting close to Valentine's Day. So maybe let's say something about romantic love. So few kind of strange, interesting things about romantic love. The first one is that partners in romantic love tend to love each other to more or less the same amount. Think about the scale, 0 to 100. Love tends to be similar. It's not going to be a big gap. That's the first rule, that it's going to be about the same. The second rule is that it's easier to love less than to love more. So imagine that you're trying to equate love. You feel you love the person more than they love you. You can try and push them up, or you can try to go down yourself. What's easier? The slippery slope down is easier. Of course, it's something which we should fight, right? We should think about this. And the third one is, if you think about this range, think about, everyone could think about their own romantic partner. Imagine a scale from 0, the least amount that you can love the person, to 100, the most you can love that person. Where are you in there? And are you pushing down, or are you pushing up? And it turns out that pushing up is it's a harder thing from an ego perspective, but it's a much healthier perspective. And the last thing about love is, I would say that if you think about this range from 0 to 100, there's things below 0. There's real hate that we're capable of that. Wow. But the good news is there's also things above 100, and that we don't see them until we get close to that. So, if you think about, what is the incentive I have to push love up? How much more room there is above? There's more room than we think. That once we get to 90, we discover that there's a bigger range behind. So, love is an interesting case study on lots of mistakes. We are evolutionary designed for social interactions. And by even learning more about our own social interactions and our own romantic love, like, there are lessons in there for how we treat other people and so on. It's kind of hopefully the height of emotional attachment.
Well,
so that's
amazing.
A good way to end for this week.
So that's great, because I want to respect your time, and but my respect for you, my love units just went up 2 percentage points based on that conversation. So Dan, really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights, and also a great plug for the show The Irrational that I know you consult on, and I'm addicted. I've been binging the whole 2 seasons so far, so it's a lot of fun.
Did you see that I appeared? Me and my daughter are a background artist in episode 9 of season 2.
Okay, gotta go find that one. Oh my gosh, I missed that.
Awesome.
The first 90 seconds.
Awesome. Well, I'll check that out.
This was great. So do you have anybody that we should talk to? Do you think we should talk to? This is always my plug. Just think about it.
There are lots of people. Yes. Shoot me an email. I'll give you some names.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.